next item, which should now be item I, road repair, drainage, and clearing schedule. As you know, we have a new interim Public Works Director, new to the title, not new to all of us in Public Works. Joe Lemlin is now the interim director, and again, did a nice job last week with his team getting the paving done and starting work on that. He has started the process of putting together a schedule to show what the Public Works employees will be working on over the summer. This is important, I think, both from a perspective of the Public Works employees being able to have visibility about the successes that they have in terms of clearing and cleaning drainage in corridors when it happens, patching and repairing roads where we can and where we will, and being able to state, you know, this is the area of town we're working in for the next 2 or 3 weeks, have people in that area be able to say good job, or you might have missed a spot, so that we make sure we cover everything clearly. The other thing I'll say is that I'm very encouraged so far with Joe. He is already starting to try to partner with the towns in the area to share equipment and share responsibilities so that we can get, you know, possibly borrow equipment and personnel and share our equipment and personnel so that we can collaboratively get our roads repaired, get as much as we can possibly get done for the remaining 80 grand that we have in this year's budget, and then the roughly 700,000 we have budgeted for next year's budget. Go ahead, Dale.
And one other thing that we talked about was perhaps the use of the sale or auction of equipment to get a roller for us to use at least more consistently than the gratitude or the graciousness that a local contractor lets us use his roller when it's not being used. But again, we're susceptible to his business needs as well. So Mr. Lemelin is looking at compiling a list of used equipment that we can perhaps sell, then in turn buy a used roller to use on some of those short-term paving projects. Mr. Lemelin is working with Mr. Millard, who actually is the street foreman, so we should have this schedule, a generic, a more defined schedule of when the street sweeping is going to happen and things like that by Wednesday of this week, which I'll share with you and then provide to the newspapers as well.
Correct, and we're going to put that up online so people can see where they'll be working, so you'll know when they're going to be in your area, and we're going to be able to check off when things get completed. Again, I think it's important for us to have a sense of completeness and accomplishment as we proceed on this very important process of getting as much of the roads fixed and passable as we possibly can, and we definitely need to be able to have the Public Works employees be working their hardest, as well as getting congratulated as they get their successes in place. Item J, outside agent. I'm sorry.
I just want to personally thank Highway Department and everyone else involved in getting these parts fixed, because I mean it's a great job done, and I want to encourage everyone in the town and the community. We have to be just as quick to thank and appreciate the work as just as quick as we are to complain about it. All right, we understand that we hear your complaints, all right, and we understand it, all right, but we need to be just as quick to appreciate the work people do and be thankful for it. I mean, honestly, obviously, it's what you expect, but just because you expect it, we shouldn't take it for granted. So if you see these guys around, it helps. As a coach, when you have a kid, when I was playing, my coach, he was always the first one to yell at me when I did something wrong, or when I wasn't doing something, but he's always the first one to let me know when I did a good job. And that makes all the difference in the world. And I think that we shouldn't take good work and positive experience for granted. So if you see them around, whether you like them or not, whether you think they did a good job or not, just say thank you and let them know that they did a good job, because I think they did an excellent job.
Candy.
Dale, could you ask them to include on the schedule when they are going to clean out the sumps and the catch basins?
Okay.
And that's for Highland Lake, correct? Or is
Well,
that that's for everyone?
I specify there because there may be others throughout town
Okay.
as well.
Outside agencies.
I'd like to thank Mr. Kaczynski for bringing this to our attention. Section 1703 of the Town of Winchester Charter reads, "No contributions by the town of more than $500 shall be made to any organization or private corporation unless the town is represented on its board by one or more members nominated thereto by the Board of Selectmen." We have written letters to all of those organizations in the forthcoming budget and the existing budget that we had made contributions of more than $500 and asking them to ensure that they are nominating, we're nominating an individual from our town to make sure that the money is spent as indicated in their organizations. In some cases, they're actually changing their bylaws to accommodate us. So we'd like to thank you for bringing that to our attention, and letters have gone out to all the organizations on May 14th, and we've already heard responses back.
And in fact, we're requiring organizations, just to be clear, that we must have satisfied the charter requirements by June 30th of this year, the end of this fiscal year, or else they will not qualify for their budget contribution next year. Candy?
Did this letter go out from Kevin Nelligan?
It went from Dale's office, but it was in consultation with Kevin. Any other questions? Brownfields revolver, Brownfields projects. There's just two items I want to mention here. The first is, as I think we all recall, we have a $300,000 revolver left that the town has available. I've had a constructive conversation with Tom Iflin, the owner of what is now known as Meadow Street Commons, the former Sun Chiefs, and he has some substantial cleanup opportunities. He is starting to get his financials together, and with Art's help, we have identified two possible financial entities to help us with the underwriting process. And I will candidly ask, I believe, Candy, you had volunteered for the committee?
Just me and Glenn.
And Glenn, right, along with me? It's the three of us. Okay, so Art's going to have meeting dates for us for this later this week, so I will get back to both of you with those. And that's for the revolving loan facility to sit down with possible financial institutions to help us with the underwriting process. And this is fundamentally different than the previous two loans in the sense that with respect to the senior housing, it was a relatively modest amount of money. I think it was $60,000 or $80,000 relative to a multi-million-dollar project. And given the financial aspects of that, it was not a big concern that that would be paid back. With respect to the Whiting Street project, which has a $100,000 revolver, it's actually cash collateralized, meaning there's not really a lot of credit risk. As a matter of fact, there's no credit risk right now on that part of the facility. So this is a different animal, and we really do need true financial institutions' help, because we will be looking at both the financial viability of the business that's already resident within Meadow Street Commons, as well as projected cash flows and projected growth to be able to look at what makes sense from an underwriting perspective in terms of facilitating the borrowing in that facility. So we will look forward to working with the two of you and putting that in place. The second thing I wanted to mention, just so everybody was aware of it, the governor announced last week another $20 million program for municipalities and not-for-profits to solicit money to clean up brownfields projects in their area. It's $20 million is a small amount for the entire state of Connecticut, but it is a significant program in terms of being a grant program. The actual details will be available to those in the northwest corner in early June, I think. It's going to be June 2nd.
Correct.
The meeting is going to be, so some of us will attend that to gather the information. And then Dale had actually found another grant possibility. I think it's a $50,000 grant possibility that we'll be looking at and exploring in terms of applying for, and also for its brownfields cleanup again.
For rehabilitation of old mill buildings.
So we are continuing to look and work on the things as they come through. So to that end, just wanted to keep everybody current in terms of that process. Any other comments or questions? Turning to a finance report. Candace, George, and I sat down with Cindy, the interim finance director, last Thursday evening at 6 o'clock. And I'm passing out sheets of paper to people. And to remind everybody, a review of the current budget showed that, in fact, we are $280,000 in revenue short for this year. Specifically, the ECS cost-sharing grant that we're actually going to receive for this year is about $154,000 less than what was in the budget. This is simply the line item was overstated. The same with employee medical contributions. It is high to the tune of about $105,000. That is $80,000 of a grant that was recorded as revenue when we don't bear the corresponding expenses, so the revenue is not kept by the town and was incorrectly incorporated. And then the remaining 25 is based on the forecast of what we're actually receiving, so this could move around a little bit, but we know at least 80 of that we're definitely not receiving. And then distressed municipalities, again, it was originally recorded at a number of, I think, 34 million, and in fact, we're only going to get 34,000, sorry, 34,000. And so we're 21,000 high on that. So when you add these three components together, we have 280,000 of revenue we will not be receiving. And that's for the current budget year, 13-14. So in addition to the bills that weren't in the budget, we also are not getting all the revenue that was in the budget. And to prevent us from spending money that we are not going to receive, I think it's important for us to freeze the line items that we can now to prevent us from going substantially overspent. And so I've passed out to everybody, and I'll make sure Sheila has a copy. I won't read the sort of gory detail codes, but I will walk through the line item categories. The first one is unnegotiated settlements. We currently have about $237,000. It's $236,530 remaining. This was put in place for various cover various expenses and contingencies, and at this point in May, it doesn't look like we're going to need that money, so we're going to freeze that line, and that'll make up the lion's share of the 280, obviously. Under administrative salaries in the rec department, the recreation director, as we know, has moved on, and in fact, we have Mr. DeVita currently volunteering, which means the $9,957 in the administrative salary line for the rec director will not be spent for this year, and we should freeze that line. And similarly, with respect to the finance director, the fringe benefits associated with the finance director should be frozen. That's estimated to be about $2,000. The current interim director is not under the benefit plan. Similarly, there was originally contemplated a short-term disability plan for the finance director. We're actually not going to carry that forward in the next budget. It's not included, but that $1,000 line item should be frozen. Similarly, in parallel in the highway department, the fringe benefits medical for the DPW director, again, Mr. Lemlin is not collecting, or we're not paying for medical benefits. We're only paying salary. So we're going to freeze $2,000 in that line that will not be spent. And then retirement annuity account for the finance director, under the retirement section in the back of the budget, there was $1,760 that will not be contributed as the finance director is not here anymore. Similarly with the DPW director, there's a number of $948 that will not be contributed because they have left. So that means we're going to freeze a total this evening of $254,195. So we're still $30,000 negative in terms of numbers. Now there are a collection of other line items that will likely be under, so we're unlikely to be actually overspent on the total budget. But from a policy perspective, given that we know we're not collecting this revenue, I think as the finance board, we have to agree to freeze these lines to make sure we don't spend money we're not going to receive. Any questions? Dale?
And just to clarify, so that we don't create a picture, while we may be short on that revenue, as of Friday, we had collected 103% of revenue for the budget year, and expenditures for the year are only at less than 80%, 78% through the year. So the town staff, in recognition of the unrecognized revenues, has done an excellent job of reducing their expenditures to the point that we actually still have over 20% of our budgeted monies basically eligible to spend under the budget with only 6 weeks left in the fiscal year. So the budget, while revenues may be down, expenditures are down even more than the revenues are. So we are tracking that. We are making sure that there is no likelihood that we're going to be overspent. Because, again, we have over 20% of our line item expenditures that are not going to be realized in the last 6 weeks of the fiscal year.
So the 25,000 gap that exists off this sheet, we still should be in good shape.
Correct.
Good.
We will not spend more money than we take in. That's the bottom line.
And that's the point of doing this, is just to absolutely make sure, because the number is large. Candy?
Yeah, one thing that's not on this sheet that probably needs to also be reported is that there are revenue items that came in that were not listed in the budget. For instance, interest and liens has $30,755. That looks like it is revenue that wasn't budgeted. The pilot has $111,000, $111,321. The Pequot grant is $44,469, and the MRSA revenue is $24,406. So that's roughly about $200,000. And I don't see it here in terms of, I know you talked about revenue shortfalls, but I don't see revenue overages here.
Yeah, and I didn't for a reason, Candy, because I think as a finance board, it's important to, if we, particularly given the precarious financial nature of the town, just to be clear, we still have documented 1.2 million of due twos from the town. We still have an $800,000 pension shortfall. We still owe $2 million in addition to the money that we have. So given the financial precariousness of the town, I think it's important not to spend unbudgeted revenues. If we receive unbudgeted revenues, we should let them fall through to the fund balance to build our savings account. I think more than one resident has commented that they're hopeful that very soon we will stop adding mills to the budget to build the fund balance, that we will actually manage our finances more responsibly. And that is the point of this evening's asking for these line items to be frozen, so that we don't use unbudgeted revenues to cover budgeted expenses, when in fact if we freeze these items this evening, we'll be able to accomplish that.
Okay, well, that wasn't my point of bringing these out, and because we have frozen budgets in the past. Budgets have been frozen in the past. Actually, most budgets have been frozen in the past. My point to bringing those out was that there are other sides of things that should also be reported in terms of these other revenues that are coming in. I have no problem with trying to make these things exact or freezing these, but you left out the other part. And, you know, I think those parts should also be included. That was my point.
And I appreciate that. And so to that end, just to round the circle with respect to next year's budget, Cindy and I did circle up with the Jay Case's office vis-a-vis next year's grant revenues, and confirmed that everything that we have in the budget for vote on Saturday, May 31st, is in fact in the governor's budget and is money that we will receive. So we won't have the same sort of issue next year. At least we're not contemplating it right now, unless, based on the governor signing that budget, we'll be fine. So I guess I would ask for a motion to freeze the line items as listed, unnegotiated settlements, line for 236,530. Could I have a motion to freeze that line?
I'll make that motion.
Candace makes a motion. Could I have a second?
I'll second it.
Jorge seconds. All in favor?
Right, just one quick, there's no chance with the contracts that aren't signed yet for any of that money needed?
Now, I've indicated that most likely the contracts will be settled by the end of the fiscal year.
But we won't need any of this money? That just
No,
got
we'll have to unfreeze it.
No, there's money in other line items for this.
So we're settling contracts, and so they're in other line items, like what?
First of all, we have not settled contracts. I spoke
Correct.
to the labor attorney today. We're most likely going to settle the contract with
You spoke to
retro
the labor
pay.
attorney?
Yes, he was in the office. We'll most likely settle the contract. He was in to meet with Dale on a matter. We'll most likely settle the contracts that have retro pay, such that they start in July, the next fiscal year, and that money is incorporated in the budget for next year. The retro pay is already included in those line items.
in the next budget.
Correct.
I don't think so.
Yes, it is.
Let's say if we freeze this and let's say we need it, can we unfreeze it without an issue? Like, let's say if we end up voting and freezing it. But then
Yes.
let's say if we need it, like, let's say if it's drastically needed, and could we unfreeze it? Or-
Yes,
Yes?
yes.
No money is going to come off these lines for other than the stated purpose. So with no finance director in place, with no public works director in place, none of that money is going to be spent. Anyway, the only line that I have concern about is the unnegotiated settlement, because the pay raises are built into next year's budget, but retro pay for this year,
It is,
should the contracts be settled, is not included in the budget.
all right, I would ask that we freeze 200,000 of the 236,530. I don't actually concur with the town manager, but out of an abundance of caution, I would ask that we freeze 200 of the unnegotiated settlements line.
Do we need to freeze it tonight? Can't we just know that we don't want to spend out of it until,
I would recommend that it's the largest line item, and I would recommend that we freeze it tonight.
And again, clarify, there's nothing scheduled to come off that line. That money will not be used for anything other than unnegotiated settlements. The only things that have come off that line, I believe to date, are the unnegotiated settlement that we had with the
Former town.
the assessor, when she retired, and we agreed to pay a certain portion of her Medicaid rider or supplement for 2 years. So I believe that that's the payment that you see off that line.
So it shouldn't hurt if we freeze it then? If we're not planning on spending it, freezing it shouldn't hurt, would it?
No, I guess if
I mean, either way.
we settle the contracts this year, then we would have to hit that. What I'm saying is, the freezing may be redundant, because we're not gonna spend the money off that line anyway.
Right, I understand that.
But if we settle the contracts, I will have to come back with you and unfreeze it.
As a policy matter, if we freeze 200, we will still have plenty left in that line item for any retro pay.
And we're in communication with Attorney Ryan.
Yes.
Correct.
so 36,000 will cover the 4 contracts if they were all settled?
Yes.
Do you agree with that, Dale, too?
I haven't really calculated a number at this point. But I mean, again, you stop and think, the DPW contract expired in June of 2011. And the other contracts have also expired, so there could be at least 1 year. And again, we're in negotiations, there are tentative agreements in place that talk about the retro, but those agreements have not been approved yet. We think that they'll be approved, because both the mayor and I talked to the labor attorney today. The intent is that we should have the labor attorney here at one of the meetings in June to ratify the agreements, which would then trigger whatever retro conditions are included in the newly agreed-upon collective bargaining agreement.
Worst-case scenario is you come back to us and we have to unfreeze it, right?
Correct. Right,
I-
that's a
I- I
worst-case
don't-
scenario.
I don't think it's a scenario that's so drastic that we need to, sit here and debate it for 2 hours.
Okay. So do I have a motion to freeze the unnegotiated
Actually, you already
settlements line?
You already do.
Sorry.
You already have a motion.
You have
Okay.
a motion and second.
And a second, okay. Any more discussion?
Did we amend the amount to?
Do we want to amend the amount to 200 from 236?
So, I
All
think
right,
we should.
amend the motion. Candace, do you agree to amend the motion to
Yes, I
200?
agree to amend the motion to freeze $200,000 from the unnegotiated settlement line, 0910388 and 4 zeros.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? 5-2, motion carries. On the administrative salary for the recreation director, 0812-190, 0000, to freeze that line item for $9,957. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Candy makes a motion. Do I have a second? Candace? Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, the accounting fringe benefits, medical for the finance director, 0114-900-0002, 0000. Sheila, I'll give you the page. And this is an estimate, but I make a motion that we freeze for the $2,000 for the fringe medical benefits for the finance director portion of that line. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Candace makes a motion. Do I have a second?
Second it.
Jorge seconds. Any discussion or questions? All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, accounting fringe benefits, short-term disability, $1,000. It's line 0114-900-0005, 0000. Do I have a motion to freeze that line for $1,000?
I'll make a motion to freeze that line for $1,000.
Candace makes a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Dan seconds. All in favor? Unanimous. Highway fringe benefits for the DPW director, 0311-900-0002, 0000, to freeze $2,000 from that line. That's the medical portion of the DPW director, for the departed DPW director.
I'll make the motion.
Candace makes a motion. Can I have a second?
Second it.
Jorge seconds. Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Retirement annuity for the finance director, sorry?
WN.
Oh, sorry, finance director is the first one, then the DP. For $1,760, line 0918-203, 0003, 0000. Do I have a motion to do this?
I'll make a motion.
Candace makes a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Jorge seconds. Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. And then lastly, the retirement annuity for the DPW director. It's $948, but it's 0918-203, 0005, 0000. Do I have a motion to freeze that line?
I'll make a motion to freeze that
Candace
line.
makes a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Glenn seconds. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor? Unanimous. We do have a budget vote scheduled for Saturday, March 31st. Again, this is a budget that focuses on trying to do the most with the least. We have not increased the headcount in Town Hall. We are honoring all contractual obligations. We have not taken anyone's hours down. We are still sticking with the same structure of the staff. We are putting $600,000 into the capital budget for roads. We are recommending a new cruiser for the police, and we are recommending a Hearst tool for the firemen, as well as, again, another $10,000 into the senior center lot for paving. We also made as a policy decision to support Highland Lake in terms of the weed control. We made a decision to support the library and give their full allocation of $200,000, and we also made a commitment to work with Friends of Main Street as recommended by several people, including the town manager. I'll lastly say that the goal of this budget is not to fix all the problems in town. It's to get us back on a track, to get things fixed and get things done. It's also designed, there's both slide presentation as well as the traditional detailed budget available online. It was designed specifically to try to be as transparent as possible and as clear as possible to the challenges that we face and how we're planning on paying for them in the future. And with that, I think we're going to move to the town managers.
Andy?
Sorry, go ahead. Oh, Candy?
Yeah, it just, you know, while you're talking about the budget and the view of what you have out there, I'd also like to just make sure that we know that the $500,000, because we've been asked about this on the Board of Selectmen's contingency line, is on the Board of Selectmen's contingency line. You've stated in a slide that 450 was supposed to go to fund balance and 50,000 for economic development, but yet that money was not left on the fund balance contingency line, so I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. Also, the money that you put on the slides to go to Soldiers Monument is coming out of the water and sewer money, the return from that, and is not included in the budget as they had originally asked for in the capital line item. And there are just a few other things that were also moved in there, but I did want to mention those because I know that those have been conversations that people have had and have asked me about.
Thank you. Dale, Town Manager's report?
All right, thank you. Continuing the interviews for the several positions that are currently vacant, which includes Public Works Director. I interviewed 5 candidates last week. I have the interview scheduled with Recreation Director candidates, I believe, next week. The Finance Director applications close on May 23rd, so if you're interested in being the Finance Director, please submit a civil service application. We have Patrol Officer testing scheduled to support the Police Department, and with the announced retirement of Ms. Janet Clausen as the Assistant Finance Director, we will review that job description with the intent to perhaps make it more of a accounting position instead of a payroll and benefits position, because that's been some of the support that Robin Manuel indicated, that to get more of an accountant person there to handle general ledger and trial balances. In addition to those staff positions, I've started interviews for benefits consultant. So I have, I believe, I interviewed 1 today, and I have 3 interviews scheduled Wednesday and 1 interview scheduled next week. As the mayor indicated, we do have a highly qualified forensic auditor, CPA, that is basically now filling Cindy's role. What Cindy was to Robin, he is now filling to support Cindy. He will be working for the town on Tuesdays and Thursdays. His name is Mr. Bruce Stratford. So he was instrumental in helping Oxford recover from their financial woes as well. So I'd like to welcome Bruce. With some key dates, Memorial Day is Monday. Town Hall will be closed. There's a Memorial Day Parade, which is sponsored by the VFW. That's May 26th. On May 29th, we go again before the State and OPM Municipal Finance Advisory Commission. That's on Thursday, May 29th at 10 o'clock a.m. The budget referendum, as discussed, was May 31st. I have the annual Town Manager Conference on June 4th, which we'll hear from the governor will be joining us, as well as Winstead's own Mr. Nader will be speaking to us. And then the state has a practice disaster exercise scheduled for Saturday, June 21st and Monday, June 23rd, which Mr. Steve Williams and I and the rest of the personnel of the Emergency Operations Center will exercise most likely on the Monday date, though a couple of us may participate on the Saturday date as well. The extent of the exercise is to focus on emergency sheltering. So we'll work with Torrington, with whom we are coordinating a regional shelter for disaster hosting. As the mayor indicated, we did meet with the labor attorney today. We are in the process of responding to what is called an MPP, or municipal prohibited practice. There's concern with the assistant assessor position going unfilled. The union filed a complaint with the state, so we're in the process of resolving that complaint. It was not resolved today. We need to bring in another union member, so we're scheduled to continue that. Labor negotiations are continuing. Hopefully we'll have those wrapped up. I believe we have 2 tentative agreements that are currently under review for 2 bargaining units, and we're scheduled for additional negotiations on May 22nd for the remaining 2 units. So hopefully the goal is to actually wrap up all 4 of them by the end of June. And then we did have an animal control agreement proposed by Harwinton that was forwarded on to Mr. Nelligan for review to determine how to move forward with that. The kennel that the town uses has significantly higher rates, and Harwinton has invited the town to utilize their facility. So once Mr. Nelligan looks at that, I'll share it with you as well to determine how we want to proceed with that agreement. This is separate and apart from the regional animal control facility that's being contemplated for all of Litchfield County, or most of Litchfield County municipalities. This is basically crafted as a short-term solution to confront the increased cost of the current kennel that they're passing on to us. So it's about 2/3 to half the cost of what the town's been paying, so. But other than that, if you have any questions, that's my report. Go ahead.
Thank you.
After you.
I was just gonna say thank you.
I got a couple things real quick. The pool of candidates for the Public Works Director, Dale, is it true that the Civil Service Commission is requiring us to use the leftover candidates from when Neil was hired, or have we been able to add to that at all?
No, we haven't been able to add. There was an existing list, which there were originally 11 people that applied when Neil applied. So I selected Neil, obviously, out of the list of candidates that they presented to me. I did interview all 11 then, but according to the civil service rules, the list is in place for 2 years. So I do have to work off that list. I will have discussions with the Civil Service Commission about how to proceed with the existing. I believe one candidate has since withdrawn, so I'm down to 4. I will discuss how to proceed with those 4 with the Civil Service Commission on Thursday evening.
All right, I truly don't mean to put you on the spot, but I mean, I'm gonna ask your professional opinion whether or not the rules that we're bound to, is that in the best interest of the town?
It creates some difficulties, and it's not just with that position. And I think this is also a somewhat unique circumstance where somebody was here for less than 2 years. But it obviously creates some issues that we've talked about with, if the greatest road engineer ever created happened to wander into town hall and said, I'd like to work for you for $1 a year, I'd have to say, sorry, you didn't apply 2 years ago.
Again, no misinterpret, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I think it's, as the town evolves, as I'm hoping that it is, that, we kind of shine the white hot spotlight on some of this stuff, because I think that it would behoove us if we had the ability to broaden the pool of candidates, but.
And I think as some of you are relatively new to the Board of Selectmen, sometimes you find out there's a lot of rules that are in place that you weren't aware of, that unfortunately we're forced to operate under some circumstances. And yes, they do merit consideration when the opportunity arises.
Okay. And then just the other things quickly, in our board packet, there was the report filed by Steve Williams, the fire marshal, that his hours allocated weren't enough to do some of the state-required inspections. And that just kind of popped out at me. He may have been putting that in repeatedly, as I know some of the managers do, but are we at risk at all by that?
No, it's just a matter of catching up. I think Steve is doing, he's taking some of the time that perhaps is allocated for other duties like the emergency management or civil preparedness, and he's using some of that time at this point in time. But he's budgeted
And no
for-
reflection on Steve, but he did note it, and I noticed that, as in the past, sometimes we just kind of read over things that, have been there, report after report after report. It just kind of jumped out at me. So
Right. Steve and I have talked about that, ensuring that if they're mandated by the state, that they will be done.
Okay. And then lastly, I don't know if this ever got resolved, because it may have been, but I know that Mr. Melanson had repeatedly indicated that the steps to the Walker Field grandstands were out of code. And I didn't know if that was anything we'd ever addressed.
No, it wasn't, and, it's one of the things that Mark's aware of, that, and I think for those of you not aware, it's either the height is slightly too high than what's permitted by the code, but he's looked into, what are the easy ways of resolving that, or the most cost-effective ways of resolving that, short of, okay, let's redo the whole thing.
Is there a timetable on that?
He's supposed to, he's been working on it for a while, but I'll get something more specific from him, Jorge. This is the granite steps.
Yeah, I know
over-
exactly.
Are they in disrepair, or are they just out of code as far as the width? Because I know they're kind of tippy going up. but
I believe, the way that it's explained to me, they're out of code due to some of the height of the risers.
okay. And as far as you know, that situation's still in play?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Dale, appreciate it.
As far as the candidates for the Public Works, I believe that job description is more focused around water and sewer, and we need more of a road guy. Is there any way to reword that job description?
All of the components are addressed in the job description, but that's something that I'll talk about with the Civil Service Commission on Thursday about. Does the current pool of candidates adequately satisfy the needs of the town? And do we need to highlight or strengthen some areas of the current job description that we think we need the focus to be?
Candace?
When we were sitting with Neil, Marcia, you and I, he mentioned that it was 30%, his job was water and sewer, and 70% town. Is that verbiage shouldn't that be included in the?
Actually, I think his budget, or his salary, I'm not sure, I'd have to remember what the
Salary split
percentage.
that way.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so wouldn't that be something that should be in a resume, and not a resume, a job description about the split of, the work level split?
And, he has his duties, I mean, it's not, there's never really a time when you can sit down and say, okay, this hour is, I'm strictly on the town side, because there's a lot of water issues that also involve
Pop up at
the town
different
side,
times, yeah.
that it blends, and it's a best estimate of how he spends his time, and how much, the town is gonna pay for his salary, and how much the Water and Sewer Commission are.
But it is appropriate to note that that job description that Neil was hired under was put in place literally a year ago, and it does give the impression that it's a more equally weighted responsibility than a 70-30 responsibility. Any more questions or comments for Dale? Correspondence? Glenn?
Two things real quick. I just wanted to thank Shaw and the Winston Journal for, it was brought to my attention, there was a recent article about the importance of grand list growth, and it's going to be an initiative of this board going forward. Certainly if the budget passes, the money that we've allotted for that, we certainly anticipate that that's going to be formulated into a pretty focused strategy. And I think it's important, and obviously kudos to the papers for picking up on that. We appreciate that very much. Secondly, there were some comments at the last meeting that we had up at Gilbert, and one of them, kind of interestingly, was a dart thrown at the board for underfunding, grossly underfunding, I think was the terminology, pretty close to that, the road improvement effort. And I think it's $600,000 that we have proposed for the upcoming year, and we, at least I think everyone up here understands that that's not a lot of money, but I think the speaker made mention that he thought it was very difficult to pay from where he was standing to the doors, which I'm going to guess about 90 feet for $600,000. And if I'm wrong, correct me, but I think the 5 areas that we paved over the past week went well past 90 feet, and I think the cost was somewhere around $38,000, $39,000. So I understand the comment, and I take it in, with a grain of salt. I know what its intention was, but I just want the people out there that perhaps, took it to heart that you can pave 90 feet for less than $600,000. And as I have said to you before, people listening and watching, that this board will absolutely make sure that that money gets spent wisely. We know that we've got a lot of people looking at us, watching what we do and how we do it, and I think it's incumbent on everybody up here to make sure that that money gets spent in the right way. So I just figured I'd make that correction if I could. Thank you.
Thanks. And the only other thing I'll add to that, to piggyback on your comments, is that over the last week I've taken the time to look at Mr. Rotundo's original road plan, 5-year capital plan, and in fact, Actually, I had looked at it before we went through the budget, as we were going through the budget process, and reminded myself that the $600,000 that we put in is actually completely consistent with what he had advised over every year for a 5-year plan. So that's not to say that how we do the fixes are exactly the same now, because it is a few years later, but the idea of the fact that we're going to make a significant investment and we're going to sustain it and we're going to fix the roads and make them passable, that is still the case. George, you wanted to say something?
Well, to your point, Glenn, it's one thing to grind some asphalt and put another surface back on that, but when you're talking about roads like, you know, the area approaching the Halliburton Bridge and going up the hill, you've got so many other aspects of the project, because those are really reconstruction. So that's when the money would go to a very short distance on something like that, because you've got utilities, you've got drainage, and some of the areas that we, you know, talking with the Public Works Director, the piping that was put in years ago was substandard. So we're talking about a lot of money to change some of those things. So a simple repave, you know, it goes, like you said, and what just was demonstrated, it'll go a lot further. So it's really, you know, a lot of the neglect that's taken place through the years because we haven't put enough money in for maintenance, or if we've had a budget that took 7 tries to get it approved, you're out of the paving season, so then you get into the spring, and then we've caught up with having to freeze money because of other situations that we actually now have become aware with the, you know, theft that was going on. But and I want to just add my comments to the improvements, the things that have taken place. Dale actually, Neil spelled out the steps that would have to be taken to do a good job with the Halliburton Bridge deck, and they did in fact follow through with it, and it was done in a nice orderly fashion. So that was, you know, an important part of this. One of the other things that, you know, observations, we've got a lot of comments about sticking to the charter. There's a section in here, first of all, there's the description of what our responsibilities are, and each of us has the same authority and responsibilities, each of us as selectmen. The mayor is able to do the agendas and so forth, but really the responsibilities and the authority that we have are all the same for all 7 of us. But section 511 says it's a non-interference part of this, and it's a very important part of the charter, because it's part of how we have a town manager form of government. And it's basically, I'm going to read it into the record just so everybody's remembering this. Neither the Board of Selectmen nor any of its committees or members shall dictate the appointment of any person or person to office or employment by the manager, or in any manner interfere with the manager or prevent him from exercising his own judgment in the appointment of officers and employees in the administrative service. Except for the purpose of investigation, the Board of Selectmen and its members shall deal with the administrative service only through the manager, and neither the board nor any members thereof shall give orders to any subordinate of the manager, either publicly or privately. In order to prevent the situation of undermining the town manager's position, we've got to honor that part of the charter. So just as a reminder to everybody.
And George, I completely agree with you, which is why I really appreciate Dale has taken a lot of time to spend with myself and Candace and Glenn and Dan and Jorge, and I appreciate you and Candy coming to the Thursday meetings before the Board of Selectmen meeting. We are very careful to make sure that Dale is the manager and he is responsible, but as the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance, it is incumbent upon us to exercise appropriate board-level judgment and appropriate guidance to make sure that we are back on track as a town, and I think we are getting there. So again, I appreciate your comments and reading it into the record, and I just want to, for the record myself, state that we have, in every step of the way, agree with you and have been working in close concert with Dale, and I appreciate the time that he's been taking with us. Candy.
Yeah, at the last meeting, I just talked a little bit about communication between all of us. And tonight, you mentioned, and Candace mentioned, there was some meetings that occurred, and I was wondering if you know that those meetings are gonna occur, because I know you mentioned that you had a couple of meetings with some people, and you met with Chief Scannell, and then you met with the labor attorney and stuff. I was wondering if you could just maybe, if it's possible, just shoot out an email to everybody, so that other people can also attend if it's possible,
Sure, these
without
meetings,
making a quorum.
yeah, no, and these meetings basically ended up being running into people in the hallway and saying, we have this issue, can you help me address it?
I was
What
only
are
at
your
the
thoughts?
finance meeting.
Well, somebody called me and thought that I had called them to set up a meeting with them, because Candace and Candy, we get mixed up. So I'm aware that there have been meetings or calls to set up some meetings, so, again, and then the things you mentioned tonight, and because I said at the last meeting, if you could just, give it a thought, and I'm not talking about just me and George, I'm talking about, the guys over there too. Everybody can just.
Agenda review, just a couple of housekeeping items. Item number 5, the town manager's report. The town manager's on vacation, so that's going to come off.
He's isn't he at his conference for disaster?
Yes, he's in California at his disaster conference. Well, conference to deal with disasters. And I actually did have a few comments. I was going to suggest that we actually, in the fund transfer section, actually more fully describe where the money is coming from and where it is going to. So for instance, on the police department, we will describe the money as coming out of holiday pay and into overtime. And I will hand this written to Sheila. And in the fire department, have it coming from the pension account to repairs and replacement of windows. And under the, that was, and then under the, I'm sorry, I didn't bring the reading glasses. Under the building department, it would be coming from the salt shed from salt to road maintenance. On the Halliburton Bridge, as some of you may know, the Highways Department actually built the bridge at the end of last week. WMC has actually already come and inspected the bridge and issued their engineering report. I'm happy to report that there is no significant structural damage. It can be repaired and reopened. In the process of milling, the Public Works Director determined, because it was more efficient and effective to rent milling equipment and have the Public Works staff do the milling. Some of you may have noticed they also milled a piece of Whiting Mill Street, which had some cones on it and had some difficulty. They milled the entry points or key points for the bridge on Bridge Street. And we're going to be able to, when the paving takes place, either at the end of this week or early next week, be able to repave those areas as well as repave the Halliburton Bridge. So I want to thank the Director of Public Works and the Public Works employees for, once the snow was gone and things were clear, for working away on this and getting it done. It's also the hope and expectation that the actual final bridge plans will be done within the next week to 10 days, and they'll be forwarded to the state. So that they can get local state DEP sign-off and subsequently Army Corps of Engineers in Boston sign-off. And we may be looking at a new bridge before the next calendar year. But the most important thing is that the bridge will be open within a week to 10 days. And again, I thank them for working together. I also want to announce a couple of other things. As many of you know, Neil Emrich's last day is Friday. The town manager appointed an interim Public Works Director. That is Joe Lemlin. Some of you may know him. He's worked in the Public Works Department before. They are overlapping this week so that they have good coordination and good communication. Joe's main focus for this week, in addition to getting up to speed in general and monitoring the progress on the Halliburton Bridge, is to also put together a priorities and timing schedule to start the drainage fix, road cleaning, and pothole repairs, which start now and continue into next year with next year's budget. And with that, we also found out late today that the focus is to start on Newfield Road tomorrow morning. So as any of you who live up in that neck of the woods and know how deep and many of the potholes are, they're going to start to address those this week, which is, I think, very good news. But again, Joe is working on putting together both a priorities list of everything from catch basins to brush to drainage, as well as roads to methodically repair the potholes. Is there any other questions, Candy?
Yeah, what's the cost on the halberds?
We don't have a final number on that. The actual billing was a little under $2,000. Neil is in the process of getting paving quotes. If he gets those back in the next day or so, we're actually going to probably call a special meeting to discuss that and finalize the terms. So we don't have final price on the paving. The back of the envelope or the preliminary estimate was that it would be somewhere between 10 and 20,000. 20,000 would really be an upper end number at this point, given that the milling itself was only a couple $1,000.